Well, hey, welcome to Friday morning. Want to remind you, tune in on Sunday. Um, we're going to be talking, we're going to try and continue to be as practical as we possibly can in our Sunday messages. And so we're going to be talking about communication, that whole dynamic in your family, what we've dreamed of and being a part of a family, and then, the disappointments that go along with being a family. Last night, the game Julie and I played, we played Nerds. And again, she destroyed me. Um, it's kind of like I feel like the YMCA basketball team that's all the kids that are short and can't shoot playing against Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and his gang. So here's the love bombardment question for the day. When we are apart, I think this about you. When we are apart, I think this about you. And should be a good family generator of good discussion. Yesterday, we talked about that encounter in Jesus' last words in John chapter 19, verse 30, tetelestai. That word meant paid in full. Interesting, simultaneously to that, you can flip over to Luke chapter 23, verse 46, where after he said tetelestai, debt paid in full, it was then that he said, into thy hands I commit my spirit. Interesting, simultaneously to that, we pick up over in Matthew 27, verse 51, says this, and behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split. What's all this business about all of a sudden? You're going from the cross to now it's as if the authors of the gospel, they span over to the temple, and the temple, there's some curtain that's torn in two. What's that all about? Well, this veil they're talking about was the curtain that hung between what was called the holy place and the Holy of Holies. Inside the Holy of Holies was the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant, you remember Raiders of the Lost Ark, it pretty much looked like that. It was this gold box, and on top of it were two basically statues of cherubim, where they had their wings facing towards one another. Once a year, the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies. He would sprinkle lamb's blood. They would slay an unblemished lamb. He would sprinkle the lamb's blood in between the wings of the cherubim. And there in that holy place, that Holy of Holies, God would consume that. And that was for the redemption of their sins for that particular year, for the forgiveness of sins. But it was just for that year. Because every year they would have to come back and they would have to do that again. And so when Jesus said, it is finished, and then into his Father's hands he committed his spirit, and then simultaneously this curtain is torn, it was representation of the fact that no longer would we have to take an unblemished lamb to the slaughter. Now, game over. We're under a new dispensation, if you will, because now we can go to God directly through the Son, through Jesus, because Jesus was that perfect, unblemished, ultimate lamb that was slain. In the Old Testament, every time you would take a lamb to the slaughter, well, it was representation of the ultimate lamb that would someday come, the Messiah that the people had been praying for. Well, Jesus, through his whole ministry, is pointing to himself. I am he. I came that they might have life. And so Jesus is the perfect, unblemished, ultimate lamb. And when he paid for mankind's debt in full, well, the curtain was torn in two. This wasn't just your mom's curtain covering the back windows. This curtain was 60 feet high. The curtain itself was 4 inches thick of woven material. But what's interesting, it was torn if a man was tearing it, he would start at the bottom and he would rip to the top because he can't reach 60 feet high. But interesting, the description in Matthew chapter 27 is it was torn from top to bottom, meaning God initiated it, God did it, God provided it. Well, now the temple sacrifice, the need for the temple sacrifice is over. And this was a big deal for the Jewish community. Can you imagine for 1,000 years, this was the system of worshiping God. And now, in one day, it's over. Can you imagine for years, grandfathers would tell the story to their grandkids, and it was a tradition that you'd take an unblemished lamb to the slaughter. And now, Jesus is that unblemished lamb. So no longer does the temple need to serve the purpose that it did. That religious system is over. Plus, here's another thing. This religious system made a lot of money because people would come in and many times they would purchase a lamb from the temple. And so this whole religious system of making money, this sacrificial system, was over. It was a hard one to give up. In one moment, that sacrificial system is over. Let me define religion for you. This is just a kind of a Dan definition of religion. If I do this, well, God will love me more. That's religion, but that's not relationship. See, what Jesus did for us on the cross settled what he feels about us. He loves us. He died for us, not based upon whether we were deserving or not. And so it's a difference between religion and relationship. So here's the practical question for the day. And we all do this to a certain degree, but what religious practices are we dependent on that give us a false sense of security? Might be a good exercise as a family to sit around and brainstorm. If you're alone, if you're single, brainstorm. What are the religious practices that we're dependent on that give us a false sense of security? You know what? We don't serve him because we have to. That's religion. We serve him because we want to. His grace has already given us eternal life for those of us who have a relationship with him. So therefore, we don't serve him because we have to. We serve him because we want to. But many times we fall back to religion. So what are the religious practices that many times we do, sometimes even unknowingly, that give us a false sense of security? Well, Jesus is saying, hey, this is what separates a relationship with him from every major religion. We serve him because we want to, not because we have to. Well, steer it into the weekend. Make the most of your time. Be intentional. Spend time. Play games. Nourish your soul. And we look forward to seeing you on Sunday morning as we talk about communication within the context of the family. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Sunday.